Good evening, darlings and deviants. My name is Lucy, and I'm just a little loony. With Commander Masters releasing today in your universe, my first thought was to talk about one of the pre-constructed decks that caught my attention, Planeswalker Party. But then I realized it was the perfect time to cover one of my favorite archetypes in Commander, Superfriends, so I'm gonna do both of those today. Without further ado, let's start the show. First things first, what does Superfriends even mean? Well, back in the yesteryears of the early 1970s, superhero cartoons were coming to their own. But for the longest time, it was all solo acts with maybe the occasional guest appearance or crossover. However, that all changed with the Superfriends. It was the first time the Justice League appeared on TV in their cartoon form, and they were all on center stage. The show ran for about 12 years, which for a children's show is pretty impressive, and I think— Stay focused, Ring Mistress. Focus on the task at hand. Oh, right. Thanks, Giggles. That's why it's good to have a good head of HR, ladies and gentlemen. Well, with Magic being a game for the nerdiest of nerds and this cast of eclectic characters in their childhood, when the Planeswalker card type was introduced in Lorwyn, the stars aligned. When you look at the original 5 Planeswalkers next to each other, it's pretty easy to draw the comparisons between the old cartoon and comic book team-ups and super teams with the designs of these 5 interplanar wizards. So that's how the archetype came to be known. Playing a lot of Planeswalkers, well, looks like you have a whole cast of comic book superheroes on your hand, so you're assembling the Superfriends. This archetype is a bit awkward to suggest colors or commanders for because Planeswalkers, being legendary permanents, share a lot of similarities with the Oops All Legends archetype, the one we covered in the last chapter. Check it out if you haven't seen it already, and to put it simply, the archetype is very customizable. Pick your favorite walkers and find a commander that suits them. However, I'll mention 2 that aren't just 5-color good stuff commanders, Commodore Guff from the new Commander Precon, and Karth the Lion. Commodore Guff is the newest commander for this archetype and the first one that's really geared towards assembling an eclectic entourage of interesting individuals. Guff is a 1, a blue, a red, and a white for a 5 loyalty planeswalker, obviously Guff type. He has 4 total abilities, 2 of which are passive. Most importantly, he can be your commander. Good thing too, or he'd be out of the running. You can't have a planeswalker as a commander after all, unless it has this ability. He also adds a loyalty counter to another one of your planeswalkers when you move to the instep. Importantly, this is another one he can't just keep ticking himself up. For his first active ability, he has +1. Create a 1/1 red wizard creature token with tap, add red, spin this mana only to cast a planeswalker spell. He protects himself, his friends, and gives you a little bit of ramp in order to play out more of your planeswalkers. His final ability is -3. You draw X cards, and Commodore Guff deals X damage to each opponent, where X is the number of planeswalkers you control. This is one of the main reasons you play Guff in a Superfriends deck. Superfriends decks traditionally have had a little bit of a hard time finding a win condition that isn't just locking everyone out of the game, or taking a super long combo turn. Obviously, you can still do both of these because this is Commander and you can do any of that kind of stuff you want, but this one is more to the point, wins the game faster, and makes people not hate you. The other commander that specifically helps out Planeswalkers is Karth the Lion. While he's been helping out Planeswalker decks since Modern Horizons 2, he's sort of played second fiddle to the more general commanders with more colors. However, he's still an excellent card to consider. For 2, a black and a green, you get a 3/5 legendary human warrior with the following effects. Whenever Karth the Lion enters the battlefield, or a planeswalker you control dies, look at the top 7 cards of your library. You may reveal a planeswalker card from among them and put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. Keep in mind, a planeswalker dies when they have no loyalty counters. So if they take damage, or you remove the last counter yourself through a minus ability or some sort, Karth's ability will trigger. His passive ability is where things get cool, but a little confusing. It reads, Planeswalker's loyalty abilities you activate cost an additional +1 to activate. An additional +1, but that doesn't make any sense. Well, dearest viewer, it's a pretty simple thing that I would love to explain, but I'm not that good at math. So let me bring on my best friend Veronica to show you all how it's done. The last time, darling, I didn't agree to this, and I'm not your friend. What are you doing? Good evening, morsels. As my tormentor so happily informed you, I'm going to explain addition to you all as it relates to planeswalker costs. Let us take Commodore Guff as an example. He has 2 abilities with loyalty costs. One is an ability that adds counters, the other removes them. So if a card like Karth the Lion asks you to add an additional +1 to that cost, you're adding an additional counter. Ergo, Guff's +1 becomes a +2. With the -3 ability, you add an additional counter to the ones you're removing before you go to remove them. To put it simply, his -3 turns into a -2 ability, meaning you only need to remove 2 counters to activate that ability. Simple as that. One day I shall be free from this. Thank you so much, Veronica. And there's your 2 commanders. There's plenty of other options out there, but these are 2 you'll want to look at first if you want to build outside of 5-color slurry of good stuff and random junk. So, you've got an idea of the deck, but how are you supposed to build it? What cards do you put in there? Planeswalkers are super hard to keep around when you have 3 opponents. So, let's think like the Super Friends themselves. First, we're going to assemble the team. 2, we're going to protect our friends. And 3, we're going to save the day by applying severe blunt force trauma to the bad guys and their skulls. The bad guys, of course, being our opponents. One is self-explanatory, and I kind of already covered it. Pick your favorite planeswalkers and find the commander that fits them and put them in the deck. We'll go over some of the heavy hitters in number 3, but hey, have fun, it's Commander after all. I'll have some of my faves cycling through here. Pause the video if any of them strike your fancy or catch your eye. 2 is protect your friends. Your walkers are going to be coming under attack from 3 different opponents, and you need ways to make that not happen. There's quite a few options here, but let's look at 3. First up is Spirit of Safety. For 4 and a white, you get an enchantment that reads, creatures can't attack you or planeswalkers you control unless their controller pays X for each of those creatures, where X is the number of enchantments you control. Even if this is the only enchantment you control, having to pay an extra mana for each creature coming at you may be just what you need to stall and keep your planeswalkers up. And if you're running any other enchantments for card draw or ramp, well, that'll just make it even harder. But that's not good enough. Let's make it so that our opponents just can't attack us at all. For that, we have Pramicon Sky Rampart. For a blue, a red, and a white, you get a 1/5 legendary wall with Defender and Flying. When it comes into play, you choose a direction, left or right. And as long as Pramicon's on the field, each player may only attack the nearest opponent in the chosen direction and planeswalkers controlled by that opponent. Basically, if you choose left, only the player to your right can attack you. It also applies to the other players, so be careful if the player in the direction you don't choose gets a big board. But that's not good enough. Luckily, I'm a bit of a stage magician in addition to being a ring mistress. So let's make our planeswalkers disappear. Semester's End is 3 and a white for an instant that exiles any number of our creatures or planeswalkers. At the start of the end step, all of those creatures or planeswalkers come back. And they get a little extra bonus for 1 more loyalty counter if they're a planeswalker, or a +1/+1 counter if they're a creature. They can't destroy your planeswalkers if they're not on the field. Now that we've got our planeswalkers in order, how about we destroy our opponents and or make their lives miserable? Now, if we're using some super powerful planeswalkers in the vein of Ugin the Spirit Dragon, or any of the Nicol Boluses, honestly, take your pick, their ultimates might just get us there, and we already talked about how Guff can help us get there. But there's no harm in having a few extra ways of winning, huh? The Chain Veil is a 4-mana legendary artifact that makes you lose 2 life if you don't activate a planeswalker ability by the end of your turn. Spoiler alert, you're losing anyway if that's happening. And for 4 and tapping the Chain Veil, you can activate all of your planeswalker abilities an additional time. That's a nice planeswalker ability. Let's do it again! And if you have anything that lets you untap the Chain Veil and activate it again, well, it's a bit excessive and you'll probably just win the game at that point, but you do you. Another way to win is going from 0 planeswalkers to literally all of the planeswalkers. From cards like Triumphant Reckoning, Command the Dreadhorde, or Ascent from Avernus, they can all bring back all of your planeswalkers from the graveyard, and that should give you more than enough activations to win the game with Guff or other planeswalker effects, or just your opponent's scooping. Like, I wouldn't want to deal with that either. And that'll just about do it for Super Friends. Okay, so this is the part where I recommend some janky card that no one's ever heard of that's pretty interesting in this archetype, but I don't think that's what I'm going to be talking about today. Today, I'm going to take the time to mention how absolutely modular this deck can be in terms of power level. From Atraxa Praetor's Voice giving all of your planeswalkers an extra counter every turn, to Vorinclex Monstrous Raider and Doubling Season giving you instant ultimates, sometimes this deck can feel very oppressive. It's up to you to determine how strong this deck is. This is very normal for most decks in Commander, but Super Friends has a certain stigma to it. a lot of planeswalkers have caused people a lot of hurt and pain in both the storyline and in, actual games of Commander. If you don't want your playgroup to target you instantly every game, maybe consider trimming away some of the super powerful planeswalkers or really strong cards that help them out, and lowering your power level intentionally. You may win less games overall, but people will still want to play with you, and those games will be more enjoyable as a result. But also, I'm not leaving you without any jank. Jared Carthalion is a 5-color planeswalker that has several cool abilities, but is notably a planeswalker that can be your commander. Why am I putting this in the jank section for Super Friends? He seems like a cool alternative option. Well, Umori the Collector is 2 and 2 Golgari hybrid mana, meaning you can pay green or black for each of those pips for a 4/5 legendary ooze that lets you choose a card type when it enters the battlefield and then make spells of that type cost 1 less. It can also be your companion as long as you fill up your deck with cards that share the same card type. They don't need to be creatures like Umori, they just need to share a different card type. You can have all artifacts, you can have all creatures, but you can see where this is going. If you fill your deck to the brim with planeswalkers, you can have Umori as a companion. Is this good? No. Most planeswalkers start at like 4 to 5 mana before they start getting really good, and we don't have a lot of ramp because like the best ones are like 3 mana that untap a thing. That's kind of okay, and Tibalt doesn't count. He may be 2 mana, but he's not part of the Cool Kids Club. Is it funny and hilarious to roll up with these two in your command zone? Yes, it's hilarious and I love it. And that wraps up this chapter of the Commander Compendium. What do you think of Commander Masters? Are you planning on picking up Planeswalker Party or any of the other new precons? Let me know down in the comments below. And hey, while you're down there, give me a like and be sure to subscribe. It lets me know that I'm doing a good job and keeps this show on the road. As always, thank you all so very much for watching, and until next time, au revoir!